Representative Freeman on HB 245.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm assuming we're on the 3-minute rule. Is that why I have the clock here?
No, we're not on the 3-minute rule.
Okay. All right. Well, I just saw it there, and I know y'all could have passed that. Not that I'm going to talk for 20 minutes, but I saw the timer
Nope.
on, so I just wanted to respect whatever the chair and the committee had decided.
You're good to go.
So thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. I'm here today on what I know is a very sensitive and specific topic to so many individual members and constituents across the state. And the bill that I'm filed is in reference to the Right to Reproductive Freedom Amendment. And like I said, I understand it's a very sensitive and specific issue for many individuals and constituents across the state. Why I've chosen to file this bill as a potential constitutional amendment is because more than once in the past few years, and this is pre-Roe v. Wade being overturned, we have found that 65% of Louisianans, including 53% of Republicans, agree that women should have the right to their own reproductive care. I don't see this as a pro-abortion bill. I see this as a pro-medical treatment bill. Just last week, we had a study that came out saying we are declining in our maternal mortality. Every single one of us should be concerned for our daughters and our granddaughters. If any of you have had any high-risk pregnancies yourself or in your family, like I have, my sister almost died from a pregnancy 14 years ago in October. Thankfully, she survived, and sadly, baby Thomas did not make it. His lungs were not fully developed, and so she lived in a hospital, a Toro hospital, for 3 months. She already had one child. So what I'm worried about is our decline in care for even those healthy pregnancies that are out there, because the study that was released last week found that some doctors aren't seeing patients in the first 12 weeks. And I'm no medical doctor, I'm no expert, but I do have 2 hospitals in my district, and I do represent quite a few physicians. And for people to forego and not have treatment because doctors are afraid to how to treat them is very worrisome for the future pregnancies, and even for those healthy pregnancies, because there's so many things. Those of us, I've had 2 children by birth, I have 4 children that I've raised. The first 12 weeks is when you find out things about your pregnancy that might be minor in those first 12 weeks, but if they're diagnosed, like high blood pressure, you can deal with that during your pregnancy. Unfortunately for my sister, it was placenta previa, placenta apriva, and then she had a placenta abruption, which are like the 3 worst combinations you could have pretty much and if you have all 3 of them at the same time, it's really horrible. So what I'm here today is to really have us consider and have the conversation that 53% of our voters in Louisiana would support an amendment like this to establish this right, because majority of our citizens, I don't care what party they're in, when you speak to them, really understand that pregnancy can be a very difficult and potentially dangerous situation, and it really does require the doctors to have a full scope of being able to advise and protect the full stage of the pregnancy. So that's essentially the bill. I know it goes into a constitutional amendment because it gives the voters that opportunity to make that decision. I filed this before I knew we might be having a constitutional convention. So, thankfully, I was still allowed to have a hearing on it. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for scheduling my bill so that we could have this very important, essential conversation for the pregnancies and for the healthy pregnancies and babies to have the full treatment and the full access to care that I believe every woman deserves in her pregnancy.
We do have a couple of questions.
I'm sure you do.
Representative Wright for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Freeman, appreciate you coming here. We've had a lot of conversations about this, so we both agree it's important. Here's my question. I don't know the exact numbers, but so we're talking 3 or 4 years ago, we passed the state amendment, right? About a pro-life amendment.
Yes.
Passed overwhelmingly, right? I mean, it was like 70, 80%, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. 62. Okay, 62. There we go. Still, that's considered a landslide in elections for what it's worth.
Sure.
I guess my question is, if the people spoke on that amendment to such an extent, like why 2-3 years later are we going to suggest that they think differently or add to it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. I hear you, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be quick pretty soon. So and I know we've seen certainly people are tired of voting on amendments, quite frankly. You got to run a statewide campaign for just about anything you try to change in the Constitution, which is why we may do the convention. I think that's the main thing I have. It's just, that's not the main thing I have. Don't get me wrong.
I got you.
But in this, the question for you is just sort of like, we just did this. It was pretty overwhelming. What's going to change? What would have changed in 2 or 3 years?
Well, for one, what would have changed, Representative Wright, is that Roe was overturned. Roe v. Wade was overturned. So that would be the major thing that changed. And from what we know from the polls that have been run across the state, some of them by Republican-known pollsters like John Couvion, and the LSU does their poll every year, that we've seen people's decision-making change in this arena since Roe was overturned. So that would have changed, and then people would have potentially experienced a high-risk pregnancy themselves, like Nancy Davis, who had to go out of state for a very, very high-risk pregnancy to have an abortion. She may or may not be here today, but she sometimes comes to the Capitol to testify, and her case is, internationally known. But what I would say is, I don't know how many other high-risk pregnancies. We know the ones that make it into the news. What we don't know is the ones, who people maybe just have a family member who had a situation that was high risk, and they had to figure out how to address the life of the mother and the potential.
Oh, no, fair enough. I'll just leave it at this. Like, I obviously know about Roe v. Wade. I mean, the amendment was essentially saying if it's overturned, this is what the state of Louisiana, this is what we believe in as part of our Constitution. So it basically anticipated that, for all intents and purposes. And my question would be, if the language in the amendment would have been a problem, they wouldn't have got 60+%. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
I hear you. But also, I wasn't here in the legislature when that was put on the ballot, so I'm a different representative than in this time, right? So that was actually put on, for those who don't know, it was put on the ballot 2 terms ago, but not put on to vote until later. So I didn't have a voter say in that. Some of us are new, so.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Wright.
Representative Johnson for a question.
Tell me if I'm correct. I'm looking at your constitutional amendment. The first 4 words that are effectively removed from our Constitution is to protect human life. You would have that removed from our Constitution. Is that correct?
Yes, that is part of the amendment, because it is to allow people to have full access to health care.
But no longer will that be part of our Constitution if your bill is passed.
That is correct.
Thank you.
Representative Weibel for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rep. Freeman, thank you for bringing this here. You mentioned in your comments or your testimony about having earlier access to health care in the pregnancy, or there's like how would this amendment, or I guess the better question is, currently, if they're not accessing health care early in the pregnancy, what about this changes that? I'm just not following the logic.
Well, for one, the doctors, if they're afraid of what they can and cannot say because they fear jail time, sometimes they're just not seeing the patients in the first 12 weeks.
So the doctor refuses to see the patient?
And so that's a study that I'll let somebody else come to the table and explain because it just came out last week. And I'm not, I haven't spoken to those doctors specifically, but I've spoken to many doctors. And, I'll refer back to my sister. She's given me permission. I've spoken on the microphone about her and her loss of baby Thomas before in another hearing. With her conditions, early diagnosis as early as possible was really important. So granted, my father is a retired physician. He was on staff at Toro when all this happened, and she had access to care at the highest levels because of her family history with the medical community. But if doctors aren't trained to take care of my sister's situation, which I believe medically what happened to her is called a spontaneous abortion. And if she wasn't living in the hospital, she would be dead, and her son, who is now 17, would not have a mom on this earth. So, she and her husband chose for her to live at Toro for 3 months. But when in the time period that she was diagnosed, people like my sister are resource rich, right? But what concerns me is when we see the maternal health care decline, other people in the state, and we do have across the state a very poor population, if they're not getting access to a doctor who understands the full scope of their care, they may not get seen early enough, they may not get diagnosed early enough to make those potential choices. And then I do represent the doctor at Tulane who trains residents, and she has called me before and said she's having a hard time recruiting doctors to train because the doctor who saved my sister's life, who literally saved my sister's life, Dr. Von Allman, had to know how to deal with a spontaneous, I forget the medical term, but the abruption of her uterus. She was a placenta problem, but anyway, that abruption was in the middle of the night. She almost bled out. Okay, so let's be really graphic. She almost died because of bleeding out. Thank God Dr. Von Allman was there. Even his two partners weren't. He was a very experienced surgeon, right? So even his two partners weren't capable. I mean, they said stuff to me and my sister when I'd been there at appointments like, we certainly hope Dr. Von Allman's not on vacation the day this happens. So when your Dr. Von Allman's retire, who's going to be there to fill that gap? Because if they're not trained to handle that, that's my worry. And that's why I think an amendment like this would allow full access.
And this amendment would then legalize abortion in Louisiana?
Yes.
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 Thank you.
Representative Larvadine for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Rep, I want to thank you for your passion, for your courage about bringing a bill of this magnitude. Explain if 53% of the people agree with having freedoms in regards to reproductive rights. Can you explain that to me?
Well, this was an LSU poll, and I think it's last year's poll. I don't have the full poll in front of me, but 52% said it should be legal in all or most cases, but 85% said that a woman should be able to obtain an abortion if her life is seriously endangered due to pregnancy. And 77% said a woman should be able to obtain a legal abortion if she became pregnant because of rape. So at this state, at this time, you can't even have an abortion if you're an 11-year-old and you're raped. So what this is telling me, LSU runs an annual poll. All of us get access to it. You can pull it up on the web. They ask a lot of questions. It's not just about abortion, but that one in specific, was not run by any organization, shall we say. It's the LSU annual poll that runs on a lot of different topics.
Do we know the ages and the demographics of those who are being polled?
I believe it's all published online. I just don't have the full poll in front of me. But, I mean, to me, it's coming out of Louisiana State University, our flagship school. I have a lot of trust in their data collection.
From your experience, what are young people saying about these draconian laws? 25 to 30, those are childbearing women. How they feel about this?
I can specifically speak to my two daughters and their friends.
And give me their ages.
24 and 35.
Okay, and they're
And neither one of them
childbearing.
has a child at this time. But I know they both would like to have children. So many of their friends are considering moving to other states. Some of my 35-year-old daughter's friends do have children. Some of them do already have children. And for those of them that had healthy pregnancies, it was not an issue. But for those who had an early miscarriage, that you would need a, I forget what it's called medically, but they have to clean out your uterus because you've DNC. Thank you. I was going to say DNR, and I knew that was wrong. So a DNC. So they were those particular cases. One of my older daughter's friends, the method in which she had to do that was kind of tricky, and it required some steps that wouldn't normally be necessary, but the doctor was afraid of potentially being accused of jail time. So, doctors are, they go to med school so they can save the life of someone like my sister, right? That's what they do. They take an oath. And when they are fearful of what may come next and what accusation, may it be true or false, would come next, they are less likely, Representative Larverdane, to react. And I know that there's more information coming from the study about some procedures that occurred, like, for example, a C-section that should never have occurred on a pregnancy because of some of these uncertainties by the doctors of what they can and cannot do.
I had an opportunity to talk to some medical students at LSU Shreveport a few months ago. And some of them were going into OBG because we've got a shortage of OBG doctors in this area. Some of them were scared about the chances of providing health care to somebody who's pregnant, who's needing health care, but then the chances of getting prosecuted because they broke the law. Explain that to me.
Well, the current law says that you can be prosecuted for performing an abortion. But like I said, sometimes there's the gray area of my sister's pregnancy, and I just easy to refer to because it's the one I understand the best because it's my family member. You as the doctor, instead of moving into I took the oath to be a physician and protect the life of my patients, you have a different decision tree when you're wondering if you might end up being accused of something in the emergency room. A lot of miscarriages present themselves in the emergency room, right? And so that particular doctor may or may not know if the patient has done something at home before they came in, or if it's just, there's a lot of miscarriages that come to the emergency room. And a lot of emergency room doctors have called me. So our current law says that you could be put in jail and face major penalties of monetary penalties if you perform an abortion. And in fact, our current law does not clarify specific intent. So if you're a psychiatrist and you prescribe some medicine to somebody and say to them, you cannot take this if you're pregnant, maybe they don't know they're pregnant and something happens and they have a miscarriage because they didn't even know they were pregnant. That particular healthcare provider could also go to jail. So the law does say that someone who performs an abortion has to go to jail, Representative Larverdane, but it also, in my opinion, is not 100% clear on that front.
Okay. And also, doctors are required to take the Hippocratic oath to do no harm.
Correct.
And that's an issue when they have to save somebody's life.
Correct.
Okay. You have the great Miss Nancy Davis here also?
I believe she's here.
Okay.
I don't know. I heard.
At the appropriate time, I'd like to ask her some questions,
Yeah, if
too.
she's here, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Carlson for a question.
Yep.
Come on, Mike.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Rep. Freeman. How are you?
Good morning, Rep. Carlson.
So I need you to help me out a little bit because I think the term reproductive care can be overly ambiguous.
Sure.
And I think a lot of times it's used to talk about women's health care broadly, but also include abortion. And yeah, so on one hand, you have the women's health care issues and the life of the mother's health, woman's health, which I fully appreciate. I appreciate the story of your sister. I was texting my wife just a minute ago to make sure it was okay that I shared this story. But for my wife and I, we really struggled to have kids. My wife had multiple miscarriages. I remember one time where, healthy baby, healthy heartbeat, everything great, and then started having some issues, went back to the doctor, no heartbeat, checked multiple times, all of that. And the question of, they said, look, well, we need to do a DNC. And the conflict, right? Because you're there hoping and wanting to see a healthy baby, and you're confronted with all of these emotions, right? And so I understand and appreciate your desire to protect the health of a mother, but to extend that to really effectively, and I think Rep. Weibel asked, your constitutional amendment fully legalizes abortion in the state of Louisiana, right? And that's my problem. That's why I disagree with talking primarily about reproductive health care and that 53% of the state across all parties support it. Because when you use that broad term, people don't know specifically what you're talking about. And I think our law was called draconian laws. I think protecting the life of an unborn child, to me, is not a draconian law. And so, when I read this bill, I'm looking at, all persons have the right to decide and implement their decisions regarding reproductive health care. It goes on and on. So your constitutional amendment says that you believe that in the state of Louisiana, we should be able to allow abortion, period.
Yes, that's what the amendment says.
At any stage of pregnancy.
That's what the amendment says. But
And then-
I'd be willing to discuss other options of how and where and when and whether that involves other certain time periods.
But as it's written, at any point in the pregnancy.
Yes, that's the
Healthy
proposed
or
bill.
unhealthy, doesn't matter.
That's the proposed bill, yes.
Okay.
You're correct, Rep. Carlson.
And it's for those reasons. I mean, I fully 100% support women's health. I also fully and 100% support the life of an unborn child. And I don't think those two statements are mutually exclusive, right? I don't think that it has to be one or the other. I think it can be both. And so I appreciate you being here this morning, but I certainly, could not and will not support any constitutional amendment that would legalize abortion.
And I understand, and I know, like I said from the beginning of this conversation, that I realize it's a very sensitive topic individually and for each of your constituents. But I will tell you, I'm a Catholic, and I was raised to believe that people have a right to make their own decisions and that God is a forgiving God. And so part of my personal belief, and I think of Sister Torian when I was a little kid with her guitar, talking about Jesus is in your heart and Jesus is forgiving. And so to me, it is part of my belief system that I don't have the right to tell somebody else, even if I personally might not choose to have an abortion. I've never been faced with that decision on a personal level. That's why I say this is so personal to each one of us, right? And so what I'll say is that, I believe that God is loving and forgiving, and, so many Bible stories out there to say so. So that's where I'm coming from, and I appreciate your sharing about your wife.
And I appreciate that. And look, I agree with you. I do believe that God is forgiving, and I believe that forgiveness is available for anyone regardless of their choices. I also believe that I don't have a right, nor does anyone have a right to take the life of an innocent life of another human being. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Representative Chenevert for a question.
Mr. Chair, Rep. Freeman, thanks for bringing this to the table. I know it is a big conversation that's happening across the country. And I do want to mention something. In this conversation, I've always thought that terminology is pretty critical. And you mentioned spontaneous abortion. Would you say that is also what has been known as a miscarriage?
I think so. I think that's also clarifies the word. I mean, that's a medical
term.
But I'm not a doctor. So.
Right.
Pull your
No.
mic a little closer.
Oh, I'm not a doctor, so I can't 100%, say that that's correct. But I believe you're right.
It's been called miscarriage. And so I just want to be careful that we differentiate that. When someone has a miscarriage, it is different than when we take the life of a child intentionally. And I think that's a problem because there's a difference between a child not surviving in the womb for whatever reason than intentionally ending the life of a child in the womb. And so the concern here in this for me is that we are ending the statement, as one of my colleagues mentioned, to protect human life. And I, as a woman who has had children, we have 4 kids, 2 of which I have birthed, that when we saw the sonogram and saw the heartbeat, I wasn't listening to my heartbeat. I was listening to the heartbeat of a child. And so my concern with this discussion that abortion is health care, there are so many wonderful doctors, and you talked about some doctors that are struggling that sometimes in these conversations. But I think these great doctors do wonderful health care for women. But health care, this is a different conversation when we're ending the life of a child, and abortion isn't health care. Abortion is ending the life of someone. And it's not ending the life of the woman carrying the child. It's ending the life of someone in the womb. And I just think that terminology, as we're having this debate, is we need to be real clear that we're ending the life of a child. And we're kind of covering it with just this terminology. Well, it's just reproductive health care. It's just reproductive. No, abortion is ending the life of a child. It is stopping heartbeats. In some cases, it is dismembering children. And we can discuss it from beginning to end. In some states, it is ending the life of a child because the child happens to have Down syndrome, like New York attempted to do. As a woman who had a sister who passed away at 2 years old, she had Down syndrome. At the time of my mother's pregnancy, doctors said, we're concerned. There could be something wrong. Did not matter because that child's life was worth protecting. Because whether the child had Down syndrome, whether the child, we weren't sure what would happen, the child's life was worth protecting. And so this amendment doesn't protect a child. This amendment doesn't protect life. And so I understand this is a brave conversation for many, and I respect so many people's discussion. But when it comes to terminology, I just want to bring to the table, and for the record, this is not health care when we're taking the life of children. It's not health care. And I just, the removal of a baby due to a miscarriage is not an abortion. Because a miscarriage is when it's not an intentional death of a child. And I just think that we need to think through terminology. And I know there's a lot around it from a national conversation. And I think it's bringing a lot of confusion. I think it's creating a lot of frustration. But at the end of the day, an abortion is ending the life of a child. And I just want to make that for the record. And so that's my concern with this amendment, that in Louisiana, we would no longer stand with a child. And so I just, that's why I can't support that.
Thank you, Representative Chenevert. Representative Mellorine for a question.
Representative Freeman, thank you. I know this is a difficult conversation for everybody, very passionate. So first, thank you for having the conversation and being willing to do that. I do need to echo what Representative Chenevert and Representative Carlson have mentioned. This is personal for me because going back to my grandmother, she was pregnant and with one of my uncles and had him. He had Down syndrome back in the 60s, was born, and she was told not to have another child because of the risk of having another child with Down syndrome. She then became pregnant again, and I don't know exactly what her position was, but I can imagine what was going through her mind when she became pregnant again. And I'm thankful every day that she had that child, because that child was my mom. And so, like, if it was not, if my concern is I may not be here today if things had turned out differently. And then to echo what Representative Carlson said, also, I've not heard back from my wife, so I'm not going to get into detail with it. But we struggled for a very long time to have kids, and I fully support the part of your amendment that talks about fertility treatment and miscarriage care and birthing options, because those are very near and dear to me. But knowing that the struggle that we had and having gone through the adoption classes and things like that, when I look at my kids, and I think it was Representative that talked about the sonograms, when I heard that heartbeat for the first time, knowing that was my son or those were my girls, I think that's a life-changing, and you know this, that's a life-changing moment. So I understand that there are concerns about if a miscarriage, treating a miscarriage can lead to a prosecution. I don't think anybody has that intent, especially on this committee. But I think there's potentially some areas where we can agree and clarify some laws. But I respectfully have to object to your amendment. So I appreciate it, though.
Thank you, Representative Mellon.
Representative Edmiston for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Representative Freeman. You're a brave woman, and I appreciate the fact that you brought this to the table for discussion. I maybe should know this, but the wording of your amendment, did you word the amendment, or does staff do that, or how does anybody's amendment become the verbiage that we have on our ballots?
I worked with staff.
I'm sorry?
I worked with staff.
Okay,
for
so
the,
together
the
to do
amendment.
that?
Yeah, it was a combination of me
Yeah.
and staff and looking at wording. And
That's what I thought, yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, I'm kind of in agreement with some of the things that have been said. It's a little misleading to me, but is it, I just want, for the record, I just want to make sure I'm reading this right. Your amendment does not specify at what point it would be unlawful or inappropriate to end a pregnancy. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And that's really all I have, but just to close, I wish everyone had your convictions when it came to COVID, because you said government should not make the decisions for individual freedoms, and you know how much of that we had, so really wish there had been more of that around during that period of time. But thank you for bringing the bill.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Representative.
Representative.
Representative Ventrella for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Freeman, too, for bringing the bill and having the conversation. And I wanted to say thank you to Representative Schinnebeer for her comments earlier, and as well as my friends down to the left. I wanted to ask you, you stated earlier that the law does not define specific intent about the crime.
Well, that's an entirely different bill, so I'd rather talk to you about that, because I will be presenting that at some point in a different committee.
Okay, well,
But
you
it's been filed.
stated earlier that the criminalization doesn't define the intent, right? What did you mean by that?
No, what I meant by specific intent, there's a certain section of the law, and I'm not a lawyer, I think you are, so you can help me when we look at it. But what I meant by that comment is that in certain sections of the law, it doesn't say specific intent to commit an abortion, which is very different than a psychiatrist writing a prescription that leads to a miscarriage, which is defined as an abortion. So, that the psychiatrist could have said, don't take this if you're pregnant, but then the person maybe didn't know or just went against medical advice. So that's why specific intent, I believe, needs to be clarified in the law. And I've had some conversations with individual members who were here last term about it. So I would be thrilled to continue that conversation with you with your lawyer hat on, so we could.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you, were you aware that the crimes in Title 14, if they're not defined expressly as specific intent crimes, then they fall to general intent?
Yeah, so I'm not aware, because I'm not a lawyer.
Okay, so I just wanted to kind of quell some of the concern that. And another question, do you have any physicians here today that are going to testify that they're unsure about what is or is not criminal conduct?
Most of them are in clinic, but I assure you, I've had roundtables with all of them at my office and on Zoom, and they do have some fear of what it specifically means. Especially, I'll be honest, I think my ER doctors worry about it the most, which I have several that I represent, because so many miscarriages show up in the emergency room. So they are concerned with it. Like I said, I asked a few if they could come today, and they are in clinic.
Yeah, I just wanted to clear up any misunderstanding with that. But under Title 14, general intent is when the circumstances indicate in the ordinary course of human experience that the offender must have adverted to the criminal consequences. Were you aware that that's defined?
No, because I'm not a lawyer. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
but that's another bill that I have. It's different. But
yeah. And I do, again, respect and understand your position here today. I, too, as a mother, I have a child. I was very, very extremely sick. Like I thought my kid was going to kill me when I was pregnant. I suffered with hyperemesis for weeks on end. So I do, mother to mother, understand your intent here. But again, I have to echo my friends down there. I just don't think that this is the proper place to do this. But I would love to have a conversation with you about the intent off the record.
Okay.
To clear that up for y'all.
Thank you.
All right, Representative Egan for a question.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Representative Freeman. This is obviously a tough road to hoe. For my own just clarity and to try to tie things together, it would seem that your sister's tragedy was a precipitant for a lot of your thoughts on this. And I guess my question is, what is it that could or should have happened differently for her that would have changed things? Because, again, as you described it, and adding that to that then, more specifically, what is it that the ER docs would want to do that they're scared to do at this point if somebody presents with a prospective or active miscarriage?
Okay, so regarding my sister, I don't think anything differently could have been done. She had the best possible care she could have.
But I guess,
So her case is just an example to me, and yes, it's obviously very
All right.
personal to
Representative
me.
Freeman,
Yeah.
we're having trouble picking you up.
Oh,
So,
okay. Move the
let's bring the
microphone
mic
closer.
closer.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Should I stand over there? No.
You good?
Okay.
We just want to get it on the record.
So Representative Egan, for my sister's case, I use that as the most personal example I have, just like some representatives have shared their own, personal experiences with their spouses and, on their own. My sister's case truly, probably, unless if the pregnancy had held longer and the baby's lungs had developed, baby Thomas would have, made it all the way through the pregnancy, but, his lungs weren't developed at the time that she had that situation. With her case, I use her case as reference because she, of course, had access to the highest levels of care, and we have so many who don't. So for somebody who might be in a different situation than my sister as far as economic status and what resources they have available to them, I worry more about the other patients, not my sister. And then your second question was about the ER docs, correct?
yeah, what is it specifically that they fear doing in cases where somebody presents with a miscarriage?
So they specifically fear going to jail. And
For doing what?
for taking care of doing a DNC after a miscarriage and having somebody accuse them of performing an abortion. That's what they specifically fear. Very specific. In fact, last year, they asked me if I would file a bill just fining them and not sending them to prison. So it's the jail time that scares them and makes them feel that they aren't performing at their best level for a miscarriage that's presented in the emergency room. And in fact, Dr. Avegno came and testified on that specific topic. She's an ER doctor. She came last year to the criminal committee and testified to that.
And that would be the Dr. Avegno, who is the city of
Yes.
New Orleans
Yeah,
medical
she's an
director.
ER doctor. Yes,
Yeah,
she's
I
an
know
ER
she is, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Appreciate it, thank you.
The board is clear. We do have some cards in support wishing to speak.
If you could clear the table.
Yes, I'm going to move.
And I would like to make a motion to invoke the 3-minute rule.
Is there any objection to invoking the 3-minute rule?
Seeing no objection, the 3-minute rule is in effect. We're not trying to limit any testimony, but we do have a lot of people that want to testify. Nancy Davis, is she present? Julie Harris and Melissa Flournoy. If y'all want to make your way to the table. We'll skip Miss Nancy and we'll go to Bruce Riley.
Bruce? I see Bruce. He doesn't hear me. All right, what about
Angela Atkins?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first? Julie, do you want me to go first?
You can.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start with Ms. Flournoy, and I just want to remind y'all we have the 3-minute rule in effect. I'll give you a 30-second heads up.
Okay. Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Melissa Flournoy. I'm a former legislator from Shreveport, District 6, Mr. Miller, and I'm an advocate for women and children, and I'm currently the board chair of 10,000 Women, Louisiana. Thank you for hearing House Bill 245 today, a constitutional amendment to enshrine access to reproductive health care in the state constitution in 2024. You have several opportunities to consider what deserves to be included in the state constitution if we have a constitutional convention this year. I hope that you will learn about reproductive health care as a result of today's presentation. When our current Constitution was approved in 1974, former Representative Woody Jenkins was proud that our Constitution began with the Declaration of Rights. Those rights included the right to due process of law, individual dignity, a right to property, a right to privacy, freedom from intrusion, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, religion, freedom of assembly, the right to vote, the right to keep and bear arms, freedom from discrimination, protection of the rights of the accused, and Section 20, the right to humane treatment. We even have the right to hunt and fish in Louisiana. But today, women do not have the right to health care in Louisiana. It's unbelievable to me that we need a constitutional amendment to ensure access to what should be appropriate and accessible, medically regulated health care, including contraception, fertility treatment, pregnancy continuation, miscarriage care, abortion care, and birthing options. It's unbelievable to me that this legislation is necessary to enshrine in the Constitution what is widely accepted, evidence-based standards of care, the right to humane treatment. Over the last 35 years, I've testified to the legislature about the health care needs of Louisiana citizens. When I was elected to the legislature in 1991, I focused on efforts to reduce teen pregnancy, provide high-quality, medically accurate health education, and to address the HIV/AIDS epidemic and to protect access to safe and legal abortion. Unfortunately, our state has continued to rank near the bottom in access to health care, teen pregnancy, HIV/AIDS, STD, including leading the nation in syphilis. Yet we pride ourselves on being the most pro-life state in the country. We need to care about women, the women who are dying in childbirth. Louisiana gets an F from the March of Dimes report card on maternal health. We do not have access to care. The legislature has focused only on abortion and is not focused on access to health care, sex ed, family planning, or maternal care to ensure that every child is a wanted child and a healthy child. We need to invest in access to health care for women. Louisiana has passed laws that jeopardize the health care of women, put fear of prosecution for doctors, criminalize the care of pregnant women. A recent report, which you'll hear about today on criminalized care, let me just one more sentence. Even if you don't pass this constitutional amendment out of committee
Ms.
today.
Flournoy, I'm going to ask that you stop your testimony.
Oh, I thought you were telling me I had 30 seconds.
No.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay. Ma'am?
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. My name is Angela Adkins. I'm the Executive Director of 10,000 Women Louisiana. Do I need to get a lawyer? Clinicians describe the confusion and fear they have observed patients express, including concerns about being criminalized for seeking reproductive health care. Quote, since Dobbs, there is much more confusion on the patient's part about what is or isn't allowed in terms of what their options are. For example, I had a patient who had a pregnancy with multiple abnormalities, and we were talking about her options, and she asked me, do I need to get a lawyer? And that would not have been something that a patient would have asked me prior to Dobbs. Many clinicians reported concerns about patients losing trust in them. One maternal fetal medicine specialist voiced, well, I'm hopeful that my patients still trust me, but it's hard to be trusting when you are told that I have to send you here or you have to go there. These are options, but I can't help you. You are on your own. This is not the physician I trained to be and how I have practiced for more than 20 years. Not how I see my role, not to walk with my patients through their whole journey. Another doctor, we are seeing a lot more transfers of what should be routine cases. That happens because they don't want to take any risk of making a decision that might be medically correct, but might be perceived as an illegal abortion. Although it would be clinically the appropriate thing to do to end the pregnancy from a clinical standpoint for the health and safety of the mother, but they don't want to deal with it. I hate to say it, but I envision that in the next couple of years, we're going to see more maternal deaths related to pregnancies that should have been taken care of better. We already have areas that are obstetrical deserts, and I'm not sure what it's going to look like in a year or two when the birth rates go up even higher. But I think it's going to get worse so that there's going to be fewer places to get obstetrical care, and there will be more patients. Another doctor from emergency medicine. One of the most heartbreaking things is about how there are no exceptions for rape and incest.
Ma'am, 3-minute rule is in effect and time has expired.
Thank you.
My name is Julie Schwamm-Harris. I'm from New Orleans. And I am going to speak from a personal point of view and try to answer some of the questions that I heard some legislators speak to, because there are a lot of people that are more expert in how the doctors are experiencing these laws and causing care to be problematic. I have had an abortion, I have had a stillborn, and I have had 2 children. So I understand the beauty of life, having a child, and that desire, that just overwhelming desire to have a child when you've had a terrible loss, having lost my baby at the moment of birth. Religious beliefs differ. I read yesterday the YWCA, one of their top priorities for handling problems with women is bodily autonomy, the decision of women about pregnancy and childbirth and abortion and how to handle their lives. I think, Representative Chenevert, that does not mean that one needs to or should have the right to an abortion through 9 months of pregnancy, where that potential life that a zygote, a sperm and an egg have come together to give life when someone's doing IVF and trying to have that baby that is wanted, when that life becomes the human life that deserves protection over perhaps the wishes of the human life that exists in the mother. Those are very difficult questions, but to get the health care we want and need in this state, to keep the doctors we want and need practicing in this state, and to keep young people who are afraid to birth in this state, we're going to have to come at some definition or some legal way to protect the rights of those to make decisions about their bodies. You and I would disagree about vaccines, but I understand the principle you're trying to protect. And I want you to understand the principle I am trying to protect in my right as a living, breathing human being to make some decisions at some point in a pregnancy before my religion and my beliefs tell me it is a baby and not a pregnancy. Am I out of time?
30 seconds.
Thank you very much. I would be happy to talk to any of you personally, just to debate the kind of thoughts I have.
We do have a
And
question. If you want to take a question, we'll Representative Weibel for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is for Ms. Flournoy. How are you?
Good, how are you, John?
Good. Good to see you.
Yes.
You use words in your testimony like freedom and humane, correct? I heard those words. Where is the freedom and the humane treatment for the child? Where's their humane treatment, their freedom?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
So if we're talking abortion, we're involving another life, the life of the mother and the life of the child, right?
Yes.
Okay. So is the child not entitled to freedom? Is the child
not entitled to freedom, Mr. Weibel?
I get to ask the questions, you don't.
Okay, well, let me answer your question in this way. I'm here today to talk about legal access to health care and the rights of women and men, and the right to contraception, family planning, in vitro fertilization, pregnancy, and the right of an individual person to decide when and if to become a parent. And so if the question is what's the legal right of the mother of a child or a woman?
That wasn't the question.
No, that's the answer I'm giving you. I would say that the question to me is what's in the best interest of the mother over the right of a child. Now we're going to disagree on abortion because I would like to say that in many ways, I think the best way to say this is that I am a pro-life person in that I don't want anyone to have an abortion. But I do feel like, and this conversation really needs to be about healthcare decision-making and physicians, because you'll hear from Nancy Davis and other women who've had healthcare tragedies. Okay, and in our effort to protect the rights of unborn babies, we have damaged the rights of women to access to medical care. We have damaged the rights of physicians to provide high-quality care. We have damaged the rights of physicians' training. Because I understand your point of view, and I appreciate it. And as a practicing Christian, as someone who's raised in the Southern Baptist tradition, I understand all of the arguments around sanctity of life. But today we're here to talk about health care and access to health care.
Actually, we're here, as Rep. Freeman answered my question, we're here to talk about abortion. And so what you're saying is the life of the child is dispensable. That's what I got from that testimony, so I appreciate you for sharing that. One thing we can agree on is access to quality health care, because in my rural community, I don't have enough providers. And it's frustrating, and I'll just end with this, because, if you remember, we were told when we passed Affordable Care Act that we would have access to quality health care, but yet we've got higher premiums, fewer providers, and our health care system is in disarray. So that's one area we can agree on. What we will not agree on is the just dispensing of human life, because we need to dispense of that human life. But thank you.
Thank you, Representative Abel.
All right, the board is clear. Ladies,
welcome to the Capitol, and if you can clear the
Thank you,
table.
appreciate it.
Nancy Davis, Bruce Riley,
And Michelle Ehrenberg. Is Michelle Ehrenberg in the committee? Okay. Welcome to the Capitol. Ms. Davis, you can go ahead and start.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Davis, and I'm here today as a supporter of House Bill 245. Reproductive freedom means having the right to decide about your body, like having children, using birth control, or getting an abortion. These decisions are personal and should be protected from government interference. I am here not only as a woman, a mother, and an advocate for reproductive rights, but also as someone who has personally experienced the impact of restrictions on reproductive health care. Despite the presence of exceptions, I, like many others, have been denied access to essential care. During my last pregnancy, carrying a non-viable fetus posed a significant risk to my life. Despite the urgent need for medical intervention, I was denied access to abortion care due to restrictive laws and policies. This denial shows that the current measures are not working, and we urgently need to change this. This experience left me struggling with trauma, pain, and profound mental health challenges that continue to affect me to this day. Laws banning abortion do not stop it. They just make it more dangerous. We need to protect everyone's right to decide what's best for their health, future, freedom, and make sure they stay safe. Abortion bans disproportionately impact marginalized communities and groups who already face significant barriers to accessing health care. Everyone should be able to get reproductive health care no matter where they live, how much money they have, or what political beliefs they hold. As elected officials, your job is to serve the people, speak up for them, and do what's best for them. You may not fully understand the impact until you are in the painful situation of facing a life-threatening pregnancy complication or receiving a devastating fetal diagnosis. Until you are forced to tussle with the possibility of losing your own life or the life of a loved one, it may be difficult to comprehend just how serious these decisions can be. Imagine, if you will, if it was your daughter, your sister, or your mother, and their lives were in danger because of a pregnancy. Would you still say she should continue it, even if it may kill her? Would you prioritize a hypothetical fetus over the well-being and survival of a living, breathing human being? It's not right to ask someone to risk their life for a pregnancy. We must prioritize the right to life and freedom over sticking to beliefs. And let me add this. Some people ask why I didn't consider adoption. But how could I even think about that if both the baby and myself are dead? How could I make such a decision knowing the impact it would have on my kids, my spouse, my family, and my parents? I urge you to support House Bill 245. Thank you.
We have a question for you, Ms. Davis. Representative Larverdane for a question.
Mr. Chair, Ms. Davis, tell me your story. I see a video clip on the media, and I'm on computer reading some stuff. Tell me your experience. What's a non-viable fetus, ma'am? Explain your dilemma to us.
Okay, well, non-viable fetus pretty much means that the fetus is not able to live outside of the womb.
Okay, and your OBGYN doctor told you that?
Yes, sir.
And how many months pregnant when you were told that?
I was 11 weeks pregnant.
Okay, and what did you and your family do when you heard that story?
What you mean, what did we do?
Okay, what was your next step once the OBG doctor told you that you had a non-viable fetus? What'd you do next?
Okay, well, we received some information and we did a lot of research to discuss, to figure out exactly what that meant for myself as well as the baby. And then we decided to terminate the pregnancy. So we actually traveled 1,500 miles away to New York to access abortion care.
And because you could not get that health care here, you had to go to New York?
Yes, sir.
And was that tough financially on your family?
Extremely.
And that was pretty costly?
Yes, sir.
Now, when you say a non-viable fetus, could that fetus survive in the real world?
No, sir.
Did the fetus have a heart, brain? Could it breathe?
The fetus was missing a skull and most of its brain.
So you would have had to bring in a baby to bury a baby?
Yes, sir. I would have had to carry my baby to bury my baby.
And so these laws force you to, they denied you access to an abortion, but you had to take on the responsibility of giving birth and then burying a child.
Yes, sir.
Was there any way this child could have survived outside the womb?
No, sir.
And you paid a substantial amount of money to have to go somewhere to deal with that?
Yes, sir. And even though, might I add, Louisiana does have exceptions in place, but clearly exceptions do not work. You know, it just doesn't cut it, because my diagnosis should have been covered under those list of exceptions, but it still wasn't. The doctors, they were scared of prosecution, losing their license, or being fined.
What hospital did you go to?
Women's Hospital.
And that's here in Baton Rouge, I think, Women's.
Yes, sir.
Women's one of the large facilities.
Yes.
You've got a lot of OBGYN, a lot of qualified staff there.
Correct.
And so they were scared to treat you during that time?
Yes, sir. They denied me care.
And with the laws that we have now, other young ladies who are in that position are forced to carry a child that just can't live outside of the womb. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you for your courage. Thank you, ma'am. No further questions.
All right, ma'am.
How you doing, Chairman, members of the committee? Bruce Riley with Vote. First, I just wanted to mention that the amendment from a few years ago was just clarifying what the Constitution said. It said that there was no protection in place in the pre-existing Constitution for the right to abortion, which was a conversation being had around the country at the time about what your Constitution currently said. So it didn't change anything. It just kind of like clarified what was happening. I just wanted to, because I heard some conversation about that earlier. I just want to mention, when my daughter's mom was in the hospital to have our daughter, last minute there was complications and she was rushed into surgery. And like, any parent to be, I was just very distraught, and I had to put my faith in the hospital care and know that they had whatever was available to try to do the right thing. Fortunately, nobody came to me and her mom was just under at that point and asked some gripping question about whose life to save or something like that. It's a terrible hypothetical. But I know that she had a 12-year-old and a 7-year-old already. She was a mom, and she had 2 kids that she cared for on a daily basis that she's continued to care for since. And now that our daughter is a teenager, and what she talks about with her ability to get reproductive health care in this state, she does not have any faith in staying in this state. She's a high school kid. At some point, she's going to likely go to college. She's going to live out her days somewhere. But this is a major reason why she doesn't see a future in Louisiana. And this is the type of stuff that her friends talk about. And having other friends who are having small children, they're concerned about the ability to have all the possible access and tools available to a doctor to make the right difficult choices and allow the parent to be part of those choices. But to really cage them in and say you only have this many choices and you can only do this, it's really an affront to the autonomy of people and to the liberty and to the healthcare people. And I would just ask you consider what is the healthcare for a rape victim. I can tell you this much, if my daughter were raped, I know her well enough, she is not having that kid. And whatever we have to do to not have that kid, that's what's going to happen. And I would question whether you would counsel your daughter to have that kid and say, you got to follow the law, young lady. You're going to have that child, and we're going to love it. And I don't think any of you would say that. And maybe you will. But I do believe a lot of you probably have your minds pre-made up on all the issues that are along this line. And I would say trust your constituents. This is not a question for you to make it legal or illegal. Put this to the voters. You can totally oppose this, and you can campaign against it, but trust the voters. Put it to them. It's too big of an issue for this committee to say, we've got this, and we're going to make the call. Put it to the voters. And you can tell the media right here, right now, I'm totally opposed to it. Put it to the voters. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Chairman Mascarello and members. Thank you so much for allowing me the opportunity to be here. I'm Michelle Ehrenberg. I'm the Executive Director of Lift Louisiana, and we were one of the authors on the report that you've heard referenced. I have copies for all of you if you are interested in reading it. So we released this report. It really documents the impact that the abortion bans have had on pregnant patients and clinicians in the state of Louisiana. We conducted dozens of interviews. We interviewed 30 different clinicians and more than a dozen patients, and also community-based organizations. And the experiences that are documented in this report really do reveal the stark ways in which the criminalization of abortion care harms pregnant patients in the state. For one, the bans are deterring clinicians from acting in their best medical judgment and providing patient-centered and evidence-based reproductive health care, which, all due respect, Representative Chenevert, actually abortion care is considered health care in a lot of circumstances in which there's a serious pregnancy complication or a miscarriage. And in fact, one emergency medicine physician recounted a situation in which their colleague ended up performing a C-section on a patient whose water had broke at 20 weeks. And this was a condition that would not have resulted in a viable pregnancy. The pregnancy would not have been able to continue. Forcing the pregnancy to continue would have put the patient at serious risk of infection or other major medical complications. But they said that the OBGYN in this case took this patient to have a C-section to preserve the appearance, and this is quoting from this report, the appearance of not doing an abortion even though it was not a viable pregnancy. What that means is now that the person has had a C-section, that means that they're now at higher risk for any future pregnancies. They can no longer deliver vaginally. And the appropriate thing to do in that circumstance would have been to perform a procedure, a D&E procedure, which is an abortion procedure without subjecting the patient to an unnecessary major abdominal surgery. Because having a C-section, like I said, increases the patient's risk of morbidity and adversely
30
impacts
seconds.
their health options in the future. So there are lots of instances documented in this report. I really hope that you'll read it, because what we are seeing is that the bans are causing confusion about what health care can be provided, and they're really putting physicians in this situation of dual loyalty, causing them a lot of moral distress and injury when they're having to weigh whether to care for their patients or potentially go to jail for providing the care that their patients need. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
We have a question by Representative Taylor.
Thank you for this opportunity. I heard you refer to some information that you have. Do you have any statistics with reference to how this has affected adversely special needs people, victims of rape, victims of incest, non-viable fetuses, or whatever? Is that included in the literature that you have for us today?
So this report actually really was what's referred to as a qualitative study. And so what we were really trying to do is document the experiences of both patients and providers. So it's not a statistical analysis necessarily, and I don't have that information in front of me today, but there are other pieces of research that I'm happy to get to you, Rep. Taylor, or any of the other committee members, that do show the instances of, or some of what is projected in terms of people who have experienced pregnancy because of sexual violence in the state since the abortion bans, and presumably, the majority of them, if not all of them, were not able to access abortion care here in Louisiana because the law doesn't permit that.
And would your documents also have information concerning the adverse effect it has had on healthcare providers?
Absolutely. There's story after story from the clinicians that were interviewed for this, and I will just say there were dozens more clinicians that wanted to participate in this, but also were so terrified of, and everyone is anonymous in here because we were trying to protect their confidentiality, the confidentiality of the patients that they served. But there were dozens more providers that really did want to talk about their experiences, but they're worried themselves about about being sort of targeted by, anti-abortion activists, or they're worried about having some sort of ramifications within their own healthcare institutions. So this is just a snapshot of what we were able to document after talking to 30 clinicians across the state. But yes, there's story after story about instances in which care was either delayed or denied to people who were suffering miscarriages or had other health complications.
30 seconds.
And it was very clear that care would have been provided had the abortion bans not been in effect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, the board is clear. If we could have the next, Helen Frank, Planned Parenthood of the Gulf Coast.
Chairman Mascarello, could I give members of the committee copies of this report if they would want one?
We'll do it after the meeting if that's okay.
That's perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Aimee Merciaca and Frankie Robertson. Go ahead and have a seat. Welcome to the Capitol, ladies. Let's go ahead and take Caitlin Joshua. Is Caitlin Joshua in the committee room?
Yeah, she's in the hallway.
Okay. Good, y'all can go ahead and start.
Okay. All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members. My name is Aimee Merciaca. I am a public health professional and a native Louisianian. I'm here to advocate for House Bill 245, a bill proposing an amendment to our state's constitution protecting the right to reproductive decision-making without undue interference from the government. Reproductive health care is inherently complex, touching upon deeply held beliefs, values, and individual circumstances. This amendment acknowledges the importance of respecting the autonomy and dignity of every person, regardless of their stance on reproductive matters. By placing this issue on the ballot, we allow the people of Louisiana to have a voice in shaping the future of reproductive health care in our state. I understand the challenges of engaging in the legislative process, especially on contentious issues like this. That's why I believe it's crucial to put this issue on the ballot, to give every voter the opportunity to participate in this important conversation, particularly given how much has changed in the last couple of years since the Dobbs decision and overturning of Roe. In essence, House Bill 245 is about ensuring that individuals can make informed choices about their own lives and health care, free from government interference or coercion. I urge this committee to consider the necessity of engaging in a democratic process that ensures all voices in this state have the opportunity to be heard on such a profoundly personal issue. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you. Ma'am, your name for the record?
Yeah, Caitlin Joshua. I'm resident of Baton Rouge, and I am in full support of this bill, House Bill 245, for a host of different reasons. But I'll just start by saying I know there's been like a lot of language and a lot of questioning around the language and what this bill would do or what this constitutional amendment would do. But essentially, I want us to first just kind of center ourselves in this what's very true ideal that the current abortion ban is not working. It's not saving the lives of babies. It's not saving the lives of mothers. And if the end goal and the end game is to, in fact, save babies, then why would we keep a law that is not doing that? We do know the facts all across the country. When abortion bans are in effect, you actually experience more people getting unsafe, unhealthy, illegal abortions, which again does not produce or provide for more children being born. I want to say that I heard the earlier conversation around miscarriages and what it really looks like in hospitals to address miscarriages. That was my story a year and a half ago. I went to Women's, I went to Baton Rouge General, I ended up at Auctioner, and all three facilities provided different types of care or no care at all, which led me to literally, at 11 weeks pregnant, running around town like a crazy person trying to find care, which does not make sense in the 21st century. This was right around the overturn of Roe versus Wade, and I've had hundreds of women email me, call me, DM me, whatever, and talk about their exact experience similar to that, right? And then I've had other women that may have not been BIPOC or people of color that experience something completely different. But the point is, right now, the current abortion ban doesn't allow for a one-size-fits-all where every woman is receiving care that they need and they deserve. I think we're still kind of operating with this notion that every woman that seeks an abortion doesn't want a baby, and that's not the case. And so for me, I do appreciate Rep. Freeman bringing this bill. I do think it addresses a much larger issue around women's health care and, yes, reproductive justice, which entails all of the terminology that we've used today. And so I implore you all to pass this bill favorably or at least work with it to try and establish something that's better on the books than right now.
Thank you.
Good morning, Chairman and committee members. My name is Helen Frank. I'm a lifelong resident of Baton Rouge, and I serve as Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood. I'm here today to urge you to advance House Bill 245 and return personal medical decisions to individual Louisianians. House Bill 245 is about limiting harmful government overreach and safeguarding every Louisianian's right to make their own personal, private health care decisions. By voting to advance House Bill 245, you will send the message that you trust individuals and women and Louisianians to decide for themselves what is best for their health care and their own families and lives. Abortion bans don't just stir political debate. They inflict real harm on real people seeking essential health care. It is health care for any number of reasons that are no one's business but theirs and their doctors. For nearly 2 years now, we've seen the devastating consequences of our state's abortion ban for patients and providers. The recent report by Lyft, Louisiana, and partners further demonstrates how this ban is violating best medical practices and pregnant people's fundamental human rights. The Reproductive Freedom Amendment is critical to mitigating this crisis that is jeopardizing Louisianians' lives every day that the abortion ban remains in effect. We cannot walk in another person's shoes. Only that individual should be able to decide whether or not to become a parent, whether or not to use birth control, or whether or not to have an abortion. Their personal decisions are just that, personal, and they should be respected and valued. No matter how you personally feel about abortion, it's time to confront the harsh reality. Abortion bans deprive people of control over their own bodies, force them into unnecessarily dangerous situations like we've heard about, worsen maternal mortality and morbidity, and diminish the quality of all reproductive health care. Today, you have the chance to do something about it. By advancing House Bill 245, you will act on behalf of the majority of Louisianians who support reproductive freedom and sent you to be their voice. By advancing House Bill 245, you will put your constituents' health and lives over divisive politics. Your actions today will signal whether Louisiana prioritizes basic human rights or succumbs to political motives. I implore you to seize this pivotal moment and stand up for freedom. You have an obligation to safeguard the rights and dignity of all Louisianians, no matter who they are or what they believe. This is the will of the people, and it is time to restore Louisianians' voice and let them decide for themselves what is best for them. Thank you.
Thank you. The board is clear. You can clear the table. We have 18 cards in support, president support, but not wishing to speak. I'm going to put those into the record. We have, I'm sorry, and Mr. Chico Yancey came in late and had a card in support. And then we have 2 cards present will provide information, Sierra Simpson and John Faria. Okay, now we'll take the opposition. Mary Asher, Ben Clapper, and Ellen Clements. Whoever wants to start first, go ahead.
I'll go first. Good morning, and thank you for this opportunity for dialogue on this preeminent issue of life. And I'm
What's
here,
your name?
Mary Carol Asher.
Thank you.
I'm here for a personal reason, but also knowing that policy changes hearts and minds about life. And so it is to this that I give first acknowledgement that everyone here is a crucial role in these policies, but there is a lawgiver and a creator higher than this court and this legislature and this Capitol. And even Representative Freeman mentioned Jesus, and she said she was a Catholic. I'm a Catholic too. And in the teaching of the church, and Jesus is pro-life, who gives life at conception through natural death and with no exceptions. And I have a personal testimony. My own child, my third son, may have had some issue with the amniocentesis. And so the doctor suggested we abort him if something were to happen, that maybe he would have some disability. And both being Catholic, we refused that suggestion by an OBGYN. And for good reason, because we would love that child no matter what. From his birth, from conception, no matter what. And he is a healthy senior at LSU right now. And so he is my own personal testimony that I chose life when others pressured abortion. And doctors have a right and a Hippocratic oath to do no harm, to protect life. In hospitals, you don't go in there for someone to kill you.
30 seconds.
I am here to say that I respect life as a Catholic, but also as a pro-life leader from conception, that is when life medically and scientifically is proven at conception, undeniable. And we know by faith, which is not mutually exclusive, that most of the major religions believe the same thing and protect life and honor
All right.
and respect life
Thank you,
from
ma'am.
conception.
3 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Ellen Hopper Clements. For me, pro-life, it's not a religious thing. It's not a political fight. For me, it's a personal fight that has affected my family. A little over 35 years ago, a 16-year-old girl in Fort Worth, Texas, found out that she was pregnant. While this was happening, a family in Metairie, Louisiana, was struggling to have a family of their own. That family in Metairie was the Hopper family. They had been to several doctors and prayed very hard for many years to have a child to complete their family. Finally, my father, Randy Hopper, brought home several adoption forms. He placed them on the counter for my mom to review. It took her quite some time to review those forms, but finally, Audrey Hopper recognized a name as she flipped through those forms. It was Edna Gladney. She had seen a Lifetime movie about Edna Gladney's life and decided to fill out that one single application. My parents continued the adoption process for several months, and finally in May of 1989, they got the call that they had been waiting for. Fun fact, my mom still has the recording from the answering machine because she screened her calls way before it was cool to do that. At that time, my dad was on a rig in the Gulf of Mexico, but his company moved mountains to get him home so that he could get on a plane to pick up his child, a baby girl. That was me. That 16-year-old girl in Texas had no idea that the decision to give up a child for adoption would not only impact her life and the lives of her family, but also a family and the life of someone in Louisiana. Since that day, 35 years ago, I have met my birth mother, and she has told me that she knew there was no way that she could give me the life that I deserved, but also abortion was not an option for her either. Adoption was the only choice. If she had not chosen adoption, I would not have this beautiful life that I have today. I would not have my 2 beautiful boys, and I certainly would not be sitting here in front of you today. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Welcome to the Capitol. Ben?
Mr. Chairman and members, my name is Ben Clapper. I'm the director of Louisiana Right to Life. Our organization was founded in 1970. It's always represented pro-life people in this state who believe the preeminent human right is the right to life, and therefore we should protect every human person, the unborn and those who are born. That's what we represent. This legislation today has been a lot of discussion around the topic, but really very little conversation about what the bill actually does, and that's what I want to address. If it were to be passed in the states and added to the state's constitution, this bill would ensure that abortion would be legal in Louisiana up until the moment of birth. No anything legislator could do to pass that, a bill to stop that. It would be legal up until birth. We believe the bill, if passed, would also lead to taxpayer funding of abortion. This is what's happened in other states when a right like this has been applied, and therefore state government would be required to use tax dollars to fund people's abortion. In addition, before Roe v. Wade was overturned, Louisiana had laws on the books when abortion was legal that would have, say, a waiting period. Minors had to have parental consent before having an abortion. There had to be informed consent before an abortion. Ultrasounds had to be provided before an abortion. Our law books are full of those protections on the unborn child, but also to make sure that the mother has proper care that is provided by, most often, a for-profit abortion facility. If this were to be passed, none of those laws could be applied because this amendment says that it would be a right and nothing could infringe upon it. Even parental consent before an abortion could not be put in place. It would really hold your hands as legislators from passing any law to restrict in any way an abortion. So we just respectfully ask you to oppose this bill and for us to focus on what this bill actually does rather than the things that were talked about today. Thank you.
We have a question. Representative Chenevert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, all of you, for your testimony. I think it's important that we hear about the children impacted in the life of the child. Sometimes in this conversation, and I refuse to ignore those children in the womb, that's what I like to speak up for. I want to ask you a question, Mr. Clapper. You mentioned up until birth.
Yes.
And so let me just be real clear on this. I had my children the day before they're born. Another woman, if this were to pass, the day before that child is born, full term, someone could say, I've decided that I want to abort the child. So this would make it, if this passes, in the state of Louisiana, a full-term child could face its death the day before it's outside the womb.
Yes, absolutely.
So I just want to make sure that we hear that for the record. If this were to pass, a full-term child would not, day after fine, but day before in the womb has no value.
That's right.
And can't be terminated.
Even if that child, a child that same age is living in a NICU of a hospital, it doesn't matter whether the child could live outside the womb, this law would allow abortion up until that moment of birth.
Well, I'll just tell you, since 1973, over 60 million children have been aborted. And that stat right there, that information, knowing that a child the day before its due date could be terminated is horrific. And I just wanted to make sure I asked that to make it very clear for the record that we understand that. Thank you for today.
Thank you.
Dr. Weibel, or Representative Weibel, for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Clapper, we heard some testimony earlier today regarding the health of a mother and specific situations. Are there provisions currently in the state of Louisiana for a doctor or a healthcare provider to make decisions that are necessary to protect the health of the mother?
Absolutely. The legislature, when in 2022, when it updated the state's pro-life law before the overturn of Roe v. Wade, it clearly lined out provisions of what's defined in law as not an abortion that's illegal under the state law. And those include in cases of a miscarriage or even an impending miscarriage. In fact, if you read the law, it's actually very fair in terms of ensuring that doctors are empowered with the ability under a good faith medical judgment consistent with other physicians in the state to take actions to make sure that woman can be cared for in that situation. So miscarriage, also when a medical emergency faces the mother as well. There's a specific provision in there that determines that physician can act to save the life of the mother and even to prevent damage to the woman's health or it says even an organ of the mother. So the law provides physicians, it empowers physicians with the ability to care for that mother. Of course, pro-life, we're pro-baby, pro-mother, and obviously you can't have a healthy child without a healthy mother. And so we support the mother and the baby, and the laws of this state reflect that. And the laws of this state ensure that elective abortion is illegal, but everything else talked about today were these other situations. And I know Dr. Kim Hardy, retired OB-GYN from Lafayette, is here, and he can also speak to those issues much better than I can.
Sure. And have you heard from physicians who are concerned with our current laws, are fearful of being prosecuted? Have you heard of any of those situations or from doctors?
There's a lot of physicians in the state, and, certainly I can't say I've surveyed every one of them, but the physicians I've talked to, and it's many physicians, have not shared that sentiment. Those physicians have shared that their practice has continued. They've been able to care for mothers, deliver babies. I'll have to say one physician.
30 seconds.
One physician, she is a current practicing OB-GYN in a large hospital system, sees 3,600 patients a year, delivers over 100 babies a year. She's told me nothing has changed. She fears no criminalization. She does multiple surgeries, miscarriages when life of the mother is threatened, and she's able to care for mothers and babies effectively, and she says that that's not the case where she is.
Thank you very much.
All right, the board is clear. If we could have the next people to testify. Robert Vautier. Bochet?
Yeah, I'd like to testify behind Dr. Harden, if that's okay.
Dr. Hall?
Hardy.
I know, sir. I'm going to call I got it. Dr. Will Hall.
Oh, sorry.
Sean Corcoran. Jennifer Maggio. Okay. Hopkins and Zenna. Oh, do we have three? Okay, I didn't see you, Dr. Hall. Sorry. Welcome to the Capitol. Ma'am, why don't you go ahead and start?
Sure. Committee and Chair, I'm honored and excited to be here. My name is Jennifer Maggio, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of a national nonprofit that's headquartered here in Baton Rouge called The Life of a Single Mom. In 1996, I sat alone in a government-issued apartment, huddled on a bathroom floor, suicidal. I was a few weeks pregnant and was overwhelmed with the thought of how I could raise another child alone. You see, I was only 19 years old and I already had one child. And yes, the weight of that statement is not lost on me. I had one child the year before, and less than 12 months later, I was expecting again. As the daughter of a former Baptist deacon, I'm not sure that words could adequately express the immense pain and shame that I endured during that time. I didn't think I could raise another child. Quite frankly, I didn't think that I could raise the one that I already had. I was just a young girl with no money, few friends, and very little hope. Perhaps I found myself in that situation as a result of my complicated past. My mother was killed when I was only 17 months old, leading my dad to become a raging alcoholic who married a total of 6 times to mask his own pain. I endured sexual assault at the hands of neighbors and babysitters for a decade. There was a myriad of emotional, physical, and sexual abuses through the years. Perhaps I found myself there because I didn't know what my true worth was, my value found in a place that no man could take away. Whatever the case, I made a call on a Friday afternoon to an abortion clinic in Jackson, Mississippi. As a girl who was practically born in the church, I knew that I didn't want to do it, but in my desperation, I didn't know how I could go on any other way. On that call, I was given specifics and costs and sat all weekend alone in an apartment contemplating what to do. Praise God, I never went through with it. Today, those 2 children that I had as a teenager are now grown, college-educated professionals with families of their own. They are on fire for the Lord and leaders in their communities. And as I sit before you, the CEO of an organization that has served over 1 million single mothers across the United States, I sit here relishing in the joy of what was once ashes that has now been restored to beauty. I could have never founded this organization or served that number of mothers had I not once been a young single mom contemplating what to do, but ultimately choosing life. I would also like to note that my choice to save my second child was after a high-risk pregnancy that almost killed me. I'm not sure how we have come to a place as a society that argues that killing life is about choice. I have held the hands of more women than I can count who have endured the pain of post-abortion. And you want to know what that abortion clinic didn't tell me so many years ago? The weight of potentially a lifetime of pain I would have endured had I chose to abort my child. The abolishing of abortion does not infringe on rights. Actually, it's quite the opposite.
Thank you, ma'am. That 3-minute rule.
Thank you.
Dr. Hall?
Thank you. I am Dr. Will Hall, and I'm the Director for the Office of Public Policy for the Louisiana Baptist Convention. I represent about 450,000 baptized adults who compose about 1,000.
Dr. Hall, pull your mic closer. We're having trouble hearing you.
Thank you. Who compose 1,550 Southern Baptist congregations in the state. And I want to make some points to address issues that have been raised I think are canards. Number one, I am a graduate of the U.S. Naval Academy, Harvard University, George Washington University, and Vanderbilt University. None of those degrees are in theology. They're all everything from general engineering, Soviet studies, to organizational development. And so I've done quite a bit of analysis. I've developed a number of surveys, and I will tell you this, don't accept these statements about polls. The results of polls are the consequence of wording of the questions. And so before you accept someone's comment about a poll, please examine the poll and the wording of that poll. I can tell you that to make some points that Representative Wright tried to raise, but in 2020, when we passed the Love Life Amendment on a ballot measure, the 1,274,167 votes that were in favor of that amendment were the largest number of favorable votes for any issue or candidate in the history of the state. We carried every parish except for Baton Rouge and New Orleans. In fact, I provided a handout for you. If you look on page 2, the second highest vote getter in the history of the state, we carried 8 blue parishes that he did not carry. So I don't think there's something that has happened in the state since 2020 that would cause a sea change in voter support for the Love Life Amendment, which this amendment would delete from the Constitution. And I don't even see a moderate shift of the electorate in that regard. Number 2, I've heard a number of issues raised about high risk, and I don't know if someone's just uninformed or if they're being intentional, but I'd like to read to you the law that actually covers these issues already. After we passed the Love Life Amendment in 2020, we passed a number of laws in 2022 to clean up our abortion laws, anticipating constitutional challenges. This is out of revised statute 40, section 1061-1, paragraph C. Notwithstanding any other provision of law, it shall be unlawful for any person to intentionally perform or intent to perform a dismemberment abortion,
30 seconds, Dr.
and thereby kill an unborn child unless necessary to prevent serious health risk to the unborn child's mother. So high-risk pregnancies are already covered. If you go to paragraph 2, right after the issue about whether a lawyer is needed, it tells you that no woman will be prosecuted in these cases. 3, if you really want to do something about maternal mortality, Representative Hughes will be presenting a bill, HB 489, tomorrow before Health and Welfare, which provides for pregnant and postpartum women that I think addresses this issue.
Thank you. Mr. Cochran.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Sean Corcoran. I'm an attorney from Lake Charles, but I'm here today as a father. I'm blessed to have 5 kids under 9. 2 biological and 3 adopted. I'm here today to speak, though, on behalf of my first son who cannot be here. Michael would be 27 this year, but he was the victim of abortion. I'm here today to speak as a father because when this happened, I had no voice. I couldn't protect him and I couldn't save him. And as a father, this powerlessness and the resulting loss of life was devastating and destructive. What happened next was I failed out of college. I spent the rest of the semester staring at a wall in my dorm room while my roommate brought me food. I moved back to Lake Charles. I went to a different school. I failed out 2 more times. I started doing drugs, trying to find things to fill that void without even realizing what it was at the time because I had shoved it so far down. And after 7 years of that, I was a homeless meth addict who had lied, stolen, and manipulated every person in my life to where there was no one left to lie to steal from, or to manipulate. And I was dying on a hotel floor of an overdose. Thankfully, God saved me at that moment, and I did not die. I woke up. I found a pamphlet for a treatment center. I got in that day. And the rest of that story, led to treatment and to 5 beautiful kids and a beautiful wife and a great career. But what I learned at treatment was that what I've been chasing that entire time, what I've been trying to figure out, the void that I had been trying to fill throughout that addiction was the void of losing my child. And it was at treatment that I was counseled to name my child. It was at treatment that I was counseled to begin a long process of dealing with that loss. And it was because of that, and because I know, thank you, the devastation that can cause, not just on mothers, but on fathers, not just on babies, but on families. And I know that the impact is long-lasting and affects generations. I have 2 kids behind me who will never meet their brother, who will never know what it's like to have an older brother, who will never know what it's like to have someone, whether he was good, bad, whether he was an attorney or an addict, in their life. I respectfully ask this committee to not let this bill pass.
Thank you, Ms. Corker. You can clear the table. Deborah Melvin, Hopkins and Zena, and Kim Hardy. All right, who would like to start? How about you, buddy?
Nope.
You just sidekicking today?
I don't want to start.
Okay, well, let's let the ladies first.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Debbie Melvin, and I'm from Thibodaux, Louisiana. And I'm here on behalf of those who cannot speak for themselves, and those people are the preborn. In my opinion, HB 245 has been introduced only to create confusion. And I won't go over what happened with the Love Life Amendment because I think we've talked about that. But over 1.2 million of our residents voted to keep abortion out of the state, basically. And we have some of the most pro-life laws in the country now, and we know that Louisiana offers the best legal protection for preborn children. In other states without clear-cut laws on the books like ours, citizens have been targets of pro-abortion campaigns designed to confuse legislators and voters. Let me ask you some thought-provoking rhetorical questions to settle some things that often get twisted in these campaigns. Do you believe that's a baby in a pregnant woman's womb? If not, what else would it be? Is it alive and growing? At what point does an embryo become a baby? When it starts to develop? Well, according to the science of biology, it begins to develop at the moment of conception. Consider the very meaning of the word embryo is a small child. What a woman is carrying in her uterus is a living, growing human being, a person. HB 245 seeks to dehumanize a child, to make it a non-entity, to say there is no moral obligation to have laws to protect the lives of the innocent. HB 245 is dangerous and radical, proposing that abortion should be legal up until the moment of birth for any reason. I see 3 differences between the preborn and the newborn: size, level of development, and location. A good question to answer here is, would you tell a woman it's okay for her to kill her 2-year-old? Or would you try to talk her out of it? What's the difference? Only size, level of development, and location between that 2-year-old and that preborn baby. We need to find real solutions to what leads women to seek abortion in the first place. No woman truly wants to abort her baby. It's not in our nature. Most of the situations are financial, educational, employment, or relational. Pregnancy resource centers offer hope, health, and healing to women before, during, and after pregnancy, and 80% of women considering abortion choose life when they see an ultrasound. More women are choosing life, more abortion workers are leaving the abortion industry, and more abortion centers throughout the country are closing their doors for good. I encourage you to keep Louisiana and its citizens safe from the abortion industry by voting no on HB 245.
Good timing. All right, who's next? Yes, sir. Go right ahead. Will you please state your name?
My name is Hopkins and Zena, and I'm from Lafayette, Louisiana.
Perfect.
My mom could have been aborted, but was not. And I'm glad that she was not, because she's the best mom. And if she was, then none of my brothers and sisters would be here, including me. My mom's mom was a teenager from a poor family and had the option to abort her first baby, aka my mom, but decided not to. And a lot of people think teens and poor people should be able to abort their babies, but I don't think it's a good thing for anybody. And it's definitely not good for babies because God wants us all to have a good life and to have a life. But everybody should at least get a life, no matter how young, poor, or how bad your parents are. Everybody, including babies, should have the right to live.
Good job. Good job.
All right, thank you. Yes, sir, go ahead.
My name is Kim Hardy. I'm a recently retired OBGYN in Lafayette, and I think I'm uniquely qualified to speak on this bill. I've delivered almost 7,000 babies in my career, and ironically, at one time was pro-choice. Early in my marriage, when my wife got pregnant before I wanted her to, I considered an abortion. In fact, it was the birth of that little boy that changed my life forever, and I decided for the rest of my life I would help women in crisis see the truth, because I truly believe if you can see the baby's alive, no one would choose abortion who has a reasonable heart. Over these many years, I've always been the medical director at the Crisis Pregnancy Center, wherever town I was, and my job was to counsel the difficult cases, the ones who the counselors couldn't convince to choose life. So I saw so many women in high-risk conditions such as kidney disease, high blood pressure, history of premature birth, you name it. I've seen women who were raped or abandoned. I estimate I've seen over 500 of these women, the hardest ones to convince, and most of these women, when they understood what they were doing, chose life. And ironically, over all these years, I run into women with children I delivered who wanted to abort them, and they were so grateful. I've never had one woman come back and say, boy, I wish you hadn't talked me out of it. Boy, I wished I'd aborted that baby. Things would have been so much better for me. Real crisis pregnancies are very short-lived. The initial shock when you find out you're pregnant scares women, and they consider abortion, like I did. But over time, things work their way out. Even the people in the toughest cases I found could continue a pregnancy, have a baby. And of the women who did abort their children, my experience has been most of them have guilt for the rest of their life. It's only natural that a woman thinks, could it have worked out? Was it a boy or a girl? Would they have liked music, or were they going to be athletes? Women are so pensive, they ask those questions forever. And I want to share with you briefly why I'm pro-life. First, because I'm a scientist. Before Roe in 1973, ultrasound didn't exist. Now we know life begins at conception. It does not remove a blob of tissue. It ends a human life. It's because I'm pro-social justice. The most important right we have is the right to life. Being a burden does not give someone the right to kill you. And this violence against the unborn has radically increased the violence in our culture. Louisiana should be a state that supports the most critical of all rights, the rights to life itself. As a gynecologist, I am very pro-woman, as they all should be. Abortion degrades women. Men are the real beneficiaries. The men have no guilt, pay no child support, and sever any connection they might have had with this woman that might continue.
Sir?
I'm out of time.
Very good. You can finish. You give you 10 more seconds to finish up. 15 seconds.
Well, let me just say that of all the problems we talked about doctors' confusion, I could answer those questions for you. I just didn't allow myself.
Well, you may have a chance. Representative Wright for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know we're trying to move through here, but young man, what was the name again?
Hopkins and Zena.
Well, listen, I want to tell you, first off, next time go first, because you do a great job. No disrespect to the other people you up there for. Your tie looks great, and I really appreciate you doing this. It's not easy to do what you did. Thank you.
Rep. Edmondson for I'm going to let that clap happen. Rep. Evanston, for a question, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Acting Chair. This question is for the doctor. You mentioned in your testimony, thank you so much for your wisdom. I think everything you said was really speaks to your experience that you have. You said during your testimony that at first, or at one point, you were pro-choice and then you changed to pro-life. You might have said it, but tell me what you think prompted that.
Oh, well, I was very selfish. We were just been married. We weren't planning to have a baby. My wife became pregnant, and when somebody said, "Want to have an abortion?" I said, "Yeah," and she said, "No." And the birth of that little boy shocked me. That's when I decided to be an obstetrician.
Okay, that's a great testimony. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Acting.
All right, thank you. Can you clear the table for me? And thank you for coming to the Capitol. All right, Miss Susan Rayborn, and I'm going to slaughter this name too, Robert Voitier. Is that right? Did I get close? Come to the table, please. Ms. Rayburn, if you want to lead off, you have 3 minutes.
Sure, Susan Rayborn. And I just want to, Woody Jenkins made sure to text me back to take care of his name being associated in any way with abortion. And what he fought for was the freedoms of all people, including unborn people. As somebody who was out at the abortion clinics pretty much every day that they were open here and sometimes in New Orleans, I can tell you that it's 90% blacks and Hispanics, and ultimately it is a form of genocide. That's the way it began, and that is the way it still is. And to have so many people out there, it was just shocking. Rep. Genevieve, I wish you would have been my really good friend when I was 18 years old, because I could have used a voice like yours. So I come from a place where I did have an abortion, and laying there, the doctor said, "Oh my goodness, it's twins." Shocking. And then you feel so despicable about yourself anyway when it happened again. That was no big deal. In my mind, these people, don't look at them in a way that sometimes the things that they say can be disgusting, but I was one of those people that justified it. And until the Lord Jesus Christ changes a heart and a mind, it is very easy to believe like the abortionists and those that are pro-abortion. My third pregnancy is when Christ saved me, and we celebrate him this week and his death on the cross for forgiveness of our sins. My daughter now is a plastic surgeon in her third year of residency. And the struggle of being a single mom is real. And the disdain I got from my mom to this day is real. It's hard. But our laws can be a force to push people toward righteousness and to push them toward what is right and good. This gentleman here, a father, I saw many boyfriends out there in tears as their girlfriend. Something needs to be done for the fathers. There needs to be some way to get an immediate injunction for a woman going to kill a man's baby. I don't know what about that, but I saw that. And I just, I know this is conservative majority. 1 year they may get closer to getting this. Maybe not this year, but the press needs to be on what to do to turn the minds and hearts of people to keep their children and to not just go in that frightened. I had the same thing, being scared to death and
Can
frightened.
you finish up for me? We were right at 3 minutes.
I'm done.
Well, thank you. All right, that was the last of anybody. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Getting ahead of myself.
Good morning. I'm Robert Boche. I'm 75 years old. I've been married 51 years, have 4 kids and 7 grandkids. I don't know how many of y'all got my video. I emailed it to everybody on this committee late, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. It was called Olivia. It was a 3-minute video, and it showed development of a child in the womb. Anybody watch it, if I might ask? Okay. Ms. Genevieve, terminology, okay? I'm going to quote Confucius. Somebody asked him, what would he do to set the world right? And after thoughtful consideration, he said, I would insist on the exact definition of words. He also said, when words lose their meaning, people will lose their liberty. Now, the committee has a 3-minute rule. I'm going to suggest, somewhat tongue-in-cheek, y'all ought to think about implementing a straight talk rule. We all have a motto, straight talk rules the day. If you have something to say it, but say what you mean. Abortion's not health care. It's not. It's killing a developing human being. People argue over, well, when does life begin? Well, conception, when a heartbeat, feel pain. Nobody thinks about this, but you can make an argument that conception began with Adam and Eve. Life began with Adam and Eve, and it's going to end on doomsday. And that's a process instituted by the Creator. And anybody who doesn't know what goes on inside a woman's womb when sperm and egg unite and they make something that's about the size of a period at the end of the sentence. And if left alone, most of the time, it's going to turn into a human being. That's a miracle. Every person sitting in this room right now, including me, is a miracle that doesn't happen by chance. So what I think people should do, that's a godly process going on. The only thing that you got a right to do to intervene in that process is to promote it and to continue it, not to terminate it. And as far as the terminology, I'd need another 3 hours to get on that. But it's ridiculous. And I also want to point out something. As far as money, stopping anybody, or causing anybody to do abortion, money is a thing. A person is not a thing. We fought a civil war over that a long time ago because people were being treated as non-persons, as things. People are not things.
Okay.
Money is a thing.
Sir?
Yeah.
Gone over on your time a little bit. You do have a question. Would you like to take the question?
Oh, yeah.
Representative Ayer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I want to say it's a comment you mentioned about baby Olivia, and to any of my colleagues, I wanted to respond. I did not get to watch it, but I have seen that multiple times. And for those that haven't, it is a medically accurate, non-political video of how a child is basically in the womb, and it is beautiful. And so thank you for bringing that to all of our attention. Thank you for your testimony today. Just want to say that.
You're welcome.
All right. Thank you for coming to the Capitol. All right. Representative Freeman, would you like to close on your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair, or Mr. Acting Chair, whichever you prefer. I just, again, appreciate this topic being discussed, members of the committee, and I know it's a very, very specific topic for many of us, and I just want you to know that my purpose for this bill, I am not pro-abortion. I'm pro-letting women decide about their own pregnancies with the medical advice of their physicians and their families. And all this bill does, despite all the other rhetoric we've heard around it, is it gives the Louisiana citizens the choice to vote on that. And I'm just wanting to give them the choice to vote on access to care for reproductive rights. Thank you so much, Mr. Acting Chair.
Thank you. Rep. Wobble for a motion?
Yeah.
No.
Is that okay, Mr.?
Yes, sir.
Rep. Freeman, I do appreciate you bringing this. It's a very tough conversation and discussion, and I know there's a lot of issues we'll be able to work together on, but just to put light to it real quick, I received 719, I just checked, emails in opposition to this. not one in support. I think this issue has been debated, and I think we know where Louisiana falls on it, and I'm going to move to involuntarily defer this bill.
Okay, Representative Weibel has moved to involuntarily defer the bill. Any objection? Okay, there's an objection, so Representative Lauderdale has objected to the motion to involuntarily defer. A vote yes would be for HB 245. A vote no would be to backwards. Okay, so a vote yes would be to involuntarily defer, and a vote no would be to move 245 out of committee. Madam Secretary, would you call the roll, please?
Representative Brown. Representative Carlson.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Carter. Representative Chenevert.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Edmonston.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Egan.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Glorioso. Speaker Pro Tem Johnson.
Yes.
Yes. Representative Larvadane. No. Representative Mellarine. Yes. Representative Taylor. No. Representative Turner?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Ventrella?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Wright?
Yes.
Yes. Representative Weibel?
Yes.
Yes. 10 yeas, 2 nays.
Okay, HB 245 will
Thank you.
be involuntarily deferred.